Well, hello again, and welcome to the Medical Mastery Podcast, the podcast of the Emerald Coast Medical Association. I am your amaranthine host, Don Davis, and I am here with an incredibly special guest that we are delighted to have with us here, Dr. Thom Mayer. Many in our audience may know who you are, and they will certainly find out more about you here, but I think your CV might be one of the most impressive that I've ever seen, and I've seen quite a few. So, Dr. Mayer, before we get into all your different titles and leadership opportunities, thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, it's an honor. Thanks for having me on. I know it's the Medical Mastery Podcast, but I appreciate you making an exception in my case and having me on. So that's greatly appreciated.
Well, you and I are not going to get along very well at all. I can just tell you, just straight from the get-go, okay? So now, just as an initial start off here, one of your titles is the lead physician for the NFL Players Association. Is that correct? Is that the
right.
title
It's
that you
technical title is medical director for the NFL Players Association, and I've had that honor and privilege for the last 25 years.
Yeah, and so, there's going to be a lot of burgeoning questions that fall into everybody's mind as soon as we talk about that. But before we get into that incredibly interesting and fertile ground, why don't you tell me, where are you from?
Well, I'm actually from Anderson, Indiana, a small town in the Midwest, and I was sharing with Michelle that my high school buddies and I, if we got into a particularly festive mood on the weekends, would drive down to Panama City State Park and camp on the pristine white sand beaches there. So.
Just a 2 or 3 short hour drive away, huh?
Yeah, something like that. And let's just say I got to know the constabulary in Panama City quite well because of our reveries.
Indeed. Okay, so you're not entirely unfamiliar with our Emerald Coast here. That's
love
great
it.
to hear.
I love it, love it, love it. I was in Pensacola recently talking to the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition. So, no, I love that area. There's historical roots there, and it is a pristine and incredible area. But the thing that impressed me the most is the people. It's always the people.
Yeah. The people kind of lead everything around here and kind of in other parts too. And I'm excited to hear about some of the people that you get to work with as well. But now, tell me about where did you go to undergraduate?
I played football. I was a linebacker at Hanover College in southern Indiana, overlooking the Ohio River. So linebacker job description, blow things up, destroy the hopes and dreams.
Get in there, mix it up.
11 guys on the other side of the field and the moronic coaches that thought they could out-scheme us. And loved it, loved every minute of it.
Now, Thom, I'm not trying to date you at any point in time here, but why don't you tell me?
I don't have an age. I'm carbon dated.
Okay. We'll see if we can get that. Chris can help us with this dating, just in case. Okay. Now, tell me about what size were you as a linebacker playing?
Well, I was undersized. I played middle linebacker, Mike linebacker.
Yes, Mike.
I went to Hanover because I. Like the not all that bright person I am, 3 days before I was supposed to go to an NC2A school that I had committed to, I realized that in those days you had to play freshman football. You could not play varsity football in the NC2A. And I thought I can start as a freshman. And so I went to Hanover, which at the time was an NAIA school. And I was about 195, and I'm 5'11" in that. So kind of Teddy Bruschi size, but with one difference, talent. I don't have Teddy Bruschi's talent.
Other than that, it's just the exact same. I can understand.
Exactly.
But if you're going to play college football undersized, that usually implies that you've got some determination and that perhaps you wouldn't be told no. Is that a fair thing to say about you?
Yeah, I tell you a quick story that when I was getting ready to go to medical school, I went to Duke. But before I went, I got a couple of invitations to go to what at the time were called free agent camps, meaning you hadn't been drafted. And so I went to the Bears and the Vikings, and they told me, aside from size, speed, strength, and talent, that I would have been a great middle linebacker. And but they did tell me something that I've treasured ever since. Both the Vikings and the Bears said, they called me Doc because they knew I was already in medical school. They said, Doc, you may not make it on the club, but you got one hell of a motor. And so it takes a certain motor to be undersized and under talented and yet still succeed.
Well, I mean, look, that's impressive just to get a tryout in and of itself.
Yeah, it's
now, I
fun.
do want to kind
It's a lot of fun.
I do want to double click a little bit on. Do you remember fondly your college playing days?
Oh, yeah. The longer ago I played, the better I was. So I've actually got the professor who videoed our games, Dr. Stan Totten, the geology professor, it sent me all the film, and it was film at that time. And I had NFL films converted to discs, so I could watch it and start and stop and break down the film and all that kind of stuff. So it's
The frozen tundra of Hanover Field, and
yeah, it's different. It's completely different.
that's
It's
awesome.
so fun.
Now, if you're anything like me in playing sports nowadays, I can play so much better up here than I can actually when my feet can do that. I wonder if that had been your experience at the time, where in your brain you were really doing things that were a level above.
Yeah, I think particularly as a middle Mike linebacker, we played essentially what would now be called a Tampa 2. That was long before Tony Dungy came up with that term when he was the head coach at Tampa. But basically a 4-3, so that everything funnels to the middle linebacker,
Yes.
which means you got an opportunity on almost every play. But it also means that you better not mess it up because all eyes are on you. And so the mental part of the game, I think what people miss about college or about pro football players is how incredibly intelligent they are, how incredibly intelligent they have to be to understand even the offensive or defensive calls that go out. I'll give you an example. Famously in the Super Bowl several years ago when the Chiefs were playing the 49ers, it was at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. They're down 20-10. Joe Buck says the Chiefs need some Mahomes magic. And it wasn't because Patrick wasn't playing well. It was that Patrick wasn't playing well because he was being accosted on every play by a very, very talented and very well schemed 49ers defense. So Patrick goes to the sideline and says to Andy Reid, Big Red, as we call him, and Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator then, and he's now back with them, do we have time to run WASP? Well, there's 7 minutes and 13 seconds. It seems like that's plenty of time. No, he's talking about football time because WASP is a play where it takes a full 5 seconds to develop, and so he needs protection to do it. So he goes in the huddle, and the call is verbatim: gun, tray right, 2-3 jet chip WASP, Y funnel. Now, you'd say, I have no idea what they're talking about. But not only do they know, every person knows what his job is, but every person knows what everyone else's job is in gun, tray right, 2-3 jet chip WASP, Y funnel. And what's the analogy? Well, if you and I say, Mrs. Smith in room 6 has a ventricular tachydysrhythmia, an unstable hemodynamics, we know we have a gestalt of exactly what she looks like. And so it's a taxonomy, it's a way of speaking. And that mental aspect of it is as true in my practice of emergency and sports medicine as it is for those players who've got to decipher what does that all mean. Then they get transferred to or traded or free agent with another club, and there's a whole new lingo they got to learn.
Right. No, I mean, what a wonderful example! What a wonderful testimonial to how these players can think and speak a different language, and how valuable a team is. And honestly, there's a vibe check to being a team that you have to feel yourself over time. You have to get used to these kind of things and kind of knowing where your teammates are going to be. Sure, you're speaking the same language, but I'll say all the time, there's nothing better than a good tech when you're in a procedure that knows exactly where your hands are going to be and just knows to hand you the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, they know before you know. You don't even have to ask. They're handing it to you ahead of time. And one of the great things about teams, and I don't mean just the sport teams,
Right.
is the ability to have played on a team, and a team could be, in my case, football, baseball, wrestling. In others, it's a different sport. It could be tennis, it could be golf, but it could also be chess. It can be debate society. It can be band. It can be madrigals or orchestra. That's a
Right.
team of people. And I find that the best leaders in medicine, but anywhere in life, are people who've been on teams. Because if you think about it, Don, we don't, those medical students you were referencing, we don't choose them because they play in the sandbox well. We choose them for medical school because they're able to get higher grades, crawl over the backs of other students to get higher grades, better references, better MCAT scores. And then we put them through medical school and residency, and then they come out and we say, oh, by the way, you have to lead teams. You have to be able to work across boundaries within teams. And, some of them have gotten that in the course of medical school and residency, and some of them haven't, and we have to teach it to them.
So exactly right that we have to, it's not just about being smart. A lot of people are smart out there. You have to be able to be smart. You have to be able to be determined. And honestly, you have to be able to take failure in some cases. And you have to be able to build upon that. That's one of the greatest teachers that you can ever have in some cases is failure and bad outcomes. If you don't learn from those, then you're not learning from anything. And
No, it's
that
true.
happens on
I would
different
talk
scales.
about the paradox of teams, and that is, in this day and age, we can assure our patients that they're going to be taken care of by a team of experts, smart people who know what are well educated and know what they're doing. But in my experience, at least, that is not remotely the same as being taken care of by an expert team. That's a different set of skills. That's a different set of knowledge of the art, the science, and the business of being able to be an expert team so that, frankly, the seams of the team aren't exposed so that when the tech hands off, doesn't risk offense. And as you say, failure, a chapter in a recent book that I did, Making Failure Your Fuel. We have to be able to do that, not just in medicine and healthcare writ large, but in life. And a simple story for that, in the 2000 draft, the 199th player taken in that draft was also the seventh quarterback taken in that draft. Now, he could have made that, oh, poor me, or I barely made it, and all that. But he made failure his fuel. He analyzed, why he was there and how he had dropped as far as he had. And I'm sure you're guessing, and your audience probably is as well.
I think everybody knows it.
Yeah, he won 7 Super Bowls and 5 MVPs. So
Yes.
Tom Brady did okay, but he did okay. He's the first one to say, and I know Tom very well, he's the first one to say, I didn't set out to be the greatest quarterback that ever lived. I set out to be the best quarterback I could be. Mm-hmm. And that's all we can do.
And if I've heard the stories correctly, and they may be apocryphal, but I believe he held that draft status in him quite a bit. And whenever he would go and play against coaches that didn't draft him, he was ready there. That was a formative experience for him, and he was going to show you what you missed out on.
Oh, I first time I met him, first of all, he spent 3.5 hours with us. I was with the executive director of the NFLPA. I tested him on it. And I'm not making this up, Don. I tested him on it. I say, name the 6. And he knew exactly what I was talking about. He named the player, the quarterback, the coach, the offensive coordinator, and the date he first kicked their butts. Because he played against all of them, and he kicked all of their
their butts repeatedly. There wasn't very many that he didn't.
Yeah, so that's a true story. That was completely spontaneous in the course of our conversation.
Yeah, and I like this too because there's a lot of different avenues you can go in medicine right now. There's the hospital-based healthcare industry. There is governmental VA. You can go into private practice. What I try and tell everybody that I can is that I'm fighting against me. I want to be the kind of doctor that I want to go see. That's my greatest competition, is to try and I'm not competing against hospitals or anything like that. I'm trying to be the best practice that I want patients to see every single time. And so.
No, I think that's exactly right. 2 quick stories. One is when my boys were younger, we have my beautiful and brilliant wife, Maureen, and I have three boys, now young men.
Yes.
But when they were younger, and I happened to be in town because I've always had to travel in my various jobs. When I was in town, I drove them to school every day and dropped them off on the way to work. And I said precisely the same thing to them, which is one more step in the journey of discovering where your deep joy intersects the world's deep needs. I swear I said this to them. They prefer to take the bus, as you might guess. But to the point that you just made, you got to figure out your deep joy.
That's right.
Because, doctor is generic, nurse is generic, tech, hospital administrator, which I hate that term to begin with for reasons we get into if you want.
Indeed.
But you have to figure out, what is my deep joy? What brings joy to my life in terms of how I serve my patients? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. Yours in cardiology, mine in emergency medicine and sports medicine. Man, you stick me in a cath. Well, I've been in a cath lab, but I was horizontal when I was in the cath lab.
Yes. Had less clothes on.
Yeah, you stick me in a cath lab and expect me to perform. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm guessing when you go to the emergency department, they got to guide you around. Here's your patient.
Absolutely.
All that stuff.
Look, I've said before, if something's happening on a plane, you much rather would prefer an emergency department physician than you would ever to have me around. So,
yeah. So you take their radial pulse to figure out whether you can cath their radial.
That's right. Exactly.
I know guys like you.
Now, look, if you had angiography machine there, I could help. Okay,
no,
that's something
exactly.
that we could do.
But we'd be all set and be able to handle it.
Well, I can't wait to make my wife and my daughters listen to that portion of the podcast again and again on repeat for several years to come. Now, look, again, obviously we could go off on several different tangents, but I do want to come back to your education at some point because, what did you finish your undergraduate degree in?
Well, I started first of all, I'm 3 months into being a linebacker. I just played a really good game at the risk of hubris, at the considerable risk of hubris. 14-4, 14 tackles, 4 assists, 2 interceptions. And the coach wants to see me. And it's like, wants to see me? I mean, what did I do wrong now? I mean, that was a pretty good game, is what I was thinking when I went in. And he says, Mayor, you got to pick a major. And I said, a major what? And he said, no, a major. You got to have a major field of study. It's like, I thought I was majoring in football. You didn't say anything about major when you were recruiting me. It took me 3 days to go before the start of the summer practices. So I chose theology. And why? I was always interested in, why things happen. Why do people behave the way they do? What are their belief systems? How does that guide what they say, what they do, and all that goes with it? And, I mean, just to be honest, Don, you didn't have to take tests. You wrote papers. And I thought, first of all, I'm not even paying for my education because I'm on a football scholarship. Now I'm going to get a degree and I don't even have to take tests. Well, fast forward to I'm now a junior theology major, all-American linebacker. And 2 of my professors call me aside, my theology advisor and a biology professor whose name was Dr. Prey. I mean, this sounds like some kind of allegorical step right in.
It's unbelievable. I'm sorry, Tom. You don't believe it, okay?
No, I know. It sounds made up. And they said, has it ever occurred to you, you might have more impact on people if you became a doctor instead of being a theology major? I restrained myself from saying, well, I'm going to be a middle linebacker for the Bears. But, I said, I trusted these guys. So I thought, here we go.
After that.
Yeah. So, I start as a junior, I start taking the pre-med courses that freshmen are at. They're looking at me like, what's this guy doing? Is he on the remedial track or something? He's already flunked all these courses. But so I ended up, only because I had to take so much chemistry and biology, that I ended up being a theology, biology, and chemistry major. So,
in the annals of academic history, I'm not certain that those 3 had gotten together to make a triple major, but congratulations for you for doing something and striking new ground.
Yeah,
probably.
If you just think about linebacker, blow things up, theology, that's some kind of demonic combination right there, because theology integrate, pull together, develop meaning out of chaos, cacophony, and confusion. But that was kind of my job as a linebacker as well, is to develop meaning out of all those things.
Well, it strikes me too, Tom, that these are, in the words of Stephen Jay Gould, non-overlapping magisteria. You have some reasoned logic. Start with some assumptions, and then from there you can extrapolate the rest on a more scientific basis. And then theology, which certainly can have a scientific bent to it, but is almost a study of how we are what we are. And so those two seems to provide you with a significant portion or capability for leadership in the future if you could really master those two fields.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think it helps you develop the observational talents, the ability to look and see and think, why not? As an
Yeah.
emergency physician, on the one hand, I don't know what's coming through the door. On the other hand, I know
Yeah. Right.
exactly what's coming through the door. But I know that behind it is not just a clinical diagnosis, but a person, a customer service diagnosis. As you know, we call it patient experience now. And I've written
Yes.
books on that and talked about that a lot. But being able to make the distinction between what's the matter with you, find it, fix it, great part of emergency medicine and cardiology, I might say. But that's different than saying to the patient, what matters to you? Because that's different. It's not the same thing. Now, someone comes into chest pain in my emergency department. There's some similarities to both what's the matter with you and what matters to you. But
Yeah.
but you take my point. I mean, you're a humanist at heart and bring that
Yes.
to your practice every day.
I have been preaching from the high horse. Regular listeners of this podcast will hear me say again and again that I believe we've lost sight in medicine that this is a customer service business. So I feel like you're in my head right now, and that's not a safe place for you to be. So I really appreciate you saying these things that I'm trying to promulgate on a big scale. This really is it. We don't make iPhones here. We're not widgets. People are not widgets. We have to not only figure out what's going on with them, which also, by the way, I think we can figure out relatively quickly, get a pretty good differential about what's going on with somebody. But then the rest of the time is getting buy-in, is getting you to believe that I know what I'm talking about, and us kind of carrying on here to make sure that we're taking care of what matters to you.
Yeah, and we talked about this before we recorded. Every patient in every branch of medicine walks into the office or the emergency department carrying their own personal physician, whose name is Dr. Chat GPT. So they've looked that up already. They have what they think is, if anything, encyclopedic knowledge. Now, I can react to that a couple ways to be binary. One, where'd your phone go to medical school? Where'd the residency and all that? And I've thought it. I just don't.
I was going to say, I've kept it up here, but
my wife says there should be a filter between my brain and my mouth, which apparently never got installed as far as I know. But I don't say it. What I say is, wow, that's interesting. What have you learned so far? Just so I know, because I need to know what their expectations are. If I can understand their expectations just by asking them, what are your expectations? What would make this, I ask every patient, what would make this an excellent emergency department visit? And the chest pain patient says, tell me I don't have a heart attack, or I do have a heart attack and I need to go to the cath lab because of my STEMI. If it's abdominal pain, they're probably worried about either appendicitis if they're young or cancer if they're not.
Of course.
But
Of course.
getting them to tell me does wonders. That's why we have whiteboards, so we can write on the whiteboard what's excellent. And it comes down to personalized precision care. Now, that's as true as you manage lipids. One person responds incredibly well to Lipitor, and another one, you got to put them on rosuvastatin to get any lowering whatsoever. And then others, you need to put them on Zetia because it comes down, but you got to get the reabsorption of statins from their GI tract. But it's fun. It's such a privilege to be a physician.
It is, and it's so humbling, but at the same time, you have to kind of keep that in mind, the idea of, I understand this disease process, I understand the pharmacology behind how we're going to intervene, but I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to say, hey, this thing didn't work. Let's reiterate. Let's start again. Let's find something that's going to make you better. I don't care what's going to make you better as long as you get better. That's my big thing. So,
well, I wish I was one of your medical students. It sounds like I would have learned a tremendous amount from you.
You probably learned a lot more than I could teach. So so you have a triple major. You have finally graduated from undergrad at Hanover. Is that correct? And
Yes.
then so you had some prospects of going to go play professional football. But how did you determine that you wanted to apply for medical school after that? Because that's a different process.
Yeah, and it was a humbling process. Is
Yes.
working through all those things. I mean, one of the requirements you're probably too young, but one of the requirements when I went through is you had to take physics. Now, why you had to take physics is completely beyond me. And as you cram 4 years of work into the 2 years that I had as a junior and senior,
Yes.
I one of the prerequisites for medical school was physics. One of the prerequisites for taking physics, at least at Hanover, was taking calculus. Well, I couldn't take calculus. I couldn't fit it in. So I took physics without taking calculus.
Wow.
That's not a lot of fun. I mean,
It's
teaching
not.
yourself calculus while you're trying to teach yourself physics is, but to me, it was just, the whole journey was great. I mean, applying to medical school was, it was really just an enjoyable thing because I didn't care if somebody told me no. They
Yeah.
said, what, theology, football? I mean, are you out of your mind? It would be like, fine, there's other medical schools. Somebody will take me in. If not, I'll just go back to the theology route and see how that goes.
Something strikes me, which is that being the Mike linebacker, which for those that are not huge sports fan, the Mike linebacker is perhaps the quarterback of the defensive side. Is that a fair
Oh
thing
yeah, I
to
mean,
say
you're
too?
calling the signals.
You're calling the signals. You're figuring out the plays. You're changing. You're audibling. You're kind of the guy in charge on the defensive side of the ball. That probably gave you, especially as an All-American, a phenomenal amount of confidence that you can figure yourself out of situations if you need to. If something's going to change, if there's going to be adversity, you can move around it.
Yeah, I wrote as you know, there's an epidemic of burnout in healthcare right now. And I wrote a book called Battling Healthcare Burnout. And make sure I get your mailing address and I'll send you these books.
Oh
My
man, stop
my
that. That's amazing.
my books sell tens of copies. They are incredibly popular.
It's tens of copies more than any of my books have sold. So
Yeah, but so when I thought about burnout, I thought, it's really just a simple ratio of job stressors, and job stressors are astronomically higher than they've ever been. And what most people would put below that is resiliency. I don't love that term, and I'll tell you why. Because if I say to you, Don, the reason you're burned out is you're not resilient enough. I didn't say it, but you're already thinking to yourself, I'm the problem? Are you serious? So it goes back to a football story. I prefer the term adaptive capacity. So if I want to lower burnout, I lower job stressors, increase adaptive capacity, or preferably do both. So true story, before my first game, we were doing the walkthrough, and you could tell that the defensive coordinator and the head coach were nervous about starting a freshman at Mike. Usually it's juniors or seniors to get enough experience to call the signals and all that. So right in the middle of the walkthrough, he stops, the defensive coordinator stops, and he comes out and he points at me and he says, Mayor, my linebackers are agile, mobile, and hostile. Is that you? And I said, oh, coach, that's me. I'm agile, mobile, and hostile. But I'm the Mike. I'm the middle linebacker. I got to read and react. I got to have my head on a swivel. I got to adapt all game long. And he paused for a second and said, my linebackers are agile, mobile, hostile, and adaptile.
and it,
And that's, to get through medical school, you got to be adaptile. To get through residency, you got to be adaptile.
that's right.
In your fellowship, I'm sure you had to adapt to the different attendings and their, let's say, quirks and foibles and different
Yeah,
ways of doing things.
idiosyncrasies, sure. And you also have to learn how to redouble your efforts, apply for things. I mean, look, there's not really a handbook on how to go through and get into residency. Yes, you have people that can guide you, but you really just have to kind of put your head down, figure it out, and start to do the things. And there is some confidence to know that, well, it's been done before. And so I'm not traveling to Mars. So I can do this. Other people have done it before. And over time, with successes, that breeds the confidence that, yeah, I can do this. I may not know exactly how to do it, but I'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, I mean that first day, as you know, out of residency or fellowship, you walk in and you're it. When the STEMI comes into the emergency department, you're the one taking them to the cath lab, And
Yes.
you got partners and all that, but the fact of the matter is, it's always a bit unsettling that first little bit, and yet having the confidence to be able to say, "I got this, I got this."
Tom, I point oftentimes to one of the more humbling experiences that I had was in my first year of fellowship in cardiology, where I had, I'd finished my residency and done fine, and was a board certified internal medicine doctor, and felt pretty high on myself, and I didn't know the first thing about cardiology. You get humbled very quickly, and that's a great experience for you in the long term, because those humbling experiences are going to make better patient outcomes at the end of the day. So.
Oh, 100%. As you say, a good internal medicine resident, got your boards. But, when you step into a cardiology fellowship, you're among the best of the best. I mean, that is it's not easy to get into a fellowship. It's not easy to be in a fellowship. And so there is that kind of the gulp where you think, wow, how did I get here? And then you start to say, well, okay, I deserve to be here. I'm among my fellows. Harry Truman, I'm big on history and quotes. Harry Truman, great story. I mean, I could spend hours just talking about Harry Truman.
Yes.
But, here's this a guy from Missouri, highly experienced, World War I artillery officer. A lot of people don't know that. Gets into the Senate, is treated as a hack politician from Pendergast, which was the guy who got him in that role in the first place. But the great thing that he said is that he got advice from a senator from Illinois who said, Harry, you're going to spend the first 6 months here wondering how you ever got here. Then you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering how the rest of us ever got here. Once that epiphany comes, then, everything's going to be okay.
Well, I think Harry Truman is honestly, it's a good example here for those that may not know so much about him. He was pretty ruthlessly principled. He was going to stand by his principles no matter what, even if he took flack for it. Truly earning the buck stops here, because if I recall correctly, he was somewhat reluctant to get into the presidency. It wasn't something that he had dreamed of doing his entire life, and I think a reluctant politician is probably some of the best that you can ever have.
Well, there's a great story. I'm sure you know it, but some of your listeners may not. When he was about the fourth choice to become FDR's fourth
yes,
term vice president. And he bluntly said, no, I have no desire, I have no talent, I'm not going to do that. And FDR had to call him and beg him. Essentially, you can imagine FDR begging anybody about anything. He said, well, if you stubborn Missouri mule want to ruin the country in the midst of a war, I suppose that and the war thing triggered with him because he was not just a veteran, but a combat veteran.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, it's hard to do counterfactuals in some cases, but it certainly seems like we got the better of that as the American people because of his leadership.
100%. And by the way, I love historical counterfactuals are, really, really interesting to be able, because I think it makes you be innovative, creative, and really think about a whole lot of not just why, but why not, and what if
That's right.
It had been Alvin Barkley who was president. Where would we be now?
Of course. Well, would the same things have happened? I doubt it. Now, so you are in medical school at this time. Now, how did you do? Oftentimes we have to decide in our world whether or not it's going to be medicine or surgery that's the clarion call to us that kind of drags us into our vocations. Many of us liking both, but kind of deciding one kind of fits the personality more than the other. You chose emergency medicine. Tell me about that decision point for you.
Yeah, so that it started with I was drawn almost immediately to the sickest of the sick. I don't want people to be in the operating room, in the cath lab, in the ICU. But if they're going to be, I want to be the doc taking care of them, and the sicker the better. I was also drawn to pediatrics for a lot of different reasons, but so I thought I was going to end up being a pediatric cardiac surgeon. And David Sabiston, who was my mentor at Duke, for some reason took a liking to me early and really mentored me along. And at the time, emergency medicine as a specialty didn't exist. at Duke, there were 5 different emergency departments, medicine, surgery,
Oh, yeah.
OBGYN, pediatrics, and psychiatry, interestingly enough. Now, obviously, all of those are one, but so thinking about emergency medicine hadn't occurred to me, but I had a commitment to the public health service, the Indian Health Service. And so I did a year of pediatrics because Dr. Sabiston said, you're going to be taking care of surgical patients the rest of your life. If you're interested in peds, learn how to take care of sick kids. And so I went to the University of Utah, great residency. I loved it. But 2 months in, they called me in the office. You're getting called in the office. Oh God, what did I do now? And they said, you don't belong in our first year residency class. And I thought, well, imposter syndrome and all that. The chairman said, you belong in the second year. We're promoting you to the second year. This is my 3rd month of being a doctor. So
Wow.
yeah, I was able to spend a lot of time with sick folks. And as it turned out, I gravitated more towards emergency medicine because I had a commitment that I had to make with the Indian Health Service. And plus, we had been moonlighting as surgical residents in local emergency departments in Idaho and around Wyoming and places like that. So it's just, it's funny. It's the serendipity, the role that serendipity plays in your life. And I don't know if I would have been a good pediatric cardiac surgeon to begin with, but I'm grateful that I became an emergency physician.
Yeah. Well, look, that's extraordinary, first of all, that you got promoted like that. I'm not sure that I've ever heard of anybody ever saying, like, you're too qualified for this, you need to be advanced. So that says a lot towards your character and perspicacity right there in and of itself. But so you go on from there. Now, at some point, sports medicine had to have called your name here because that's a separate fellowship that can be fallen into from a few different territories. How did you find yourself leaning towards that?
Well, a couple things. Being an athlete, and I always tell my players I have responsibility not just for the current 2,500 current dues-paying members of the union, but increasingly for the former players. And I always tell my players when it comes to transition, you're going to be a former player a lot longer than you're a player, even if you're Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Lamar Jackson, who plays 20 years. So getting ready for that becomes very important. Number one. Number two, as an emergency physician, you see sports medicine all the time. That's where concussions go. That's where heat illness goes. That's where cardiac arrests go. That's where the player with the Bills was resuscitated on the field by 3 emergency physicians, friends of mine. And plus my kids were all athletes. And so I was always on the sidelines of their games, whether it was football, lacrosse, whatever sport that they were in at the time. And so the people, you're going to ask me, or somebody's going to ask me, hey, Doc, how did you get how do I build my resume to get a job like yours as the medical director of the NFL Players Association? So I got that job on August 1st, 2001. Corey Stringer, a tackle for the Vikings, died of heat stroke on the practice field. On the practice field. Inconceivable. I got a phone call from Gene Upshaw, best left guard in the history of the game and in the Hall of Fame, but also the executive director at that time of the NFL Players Association. And he said, Doc, you got to step up to the plate. You're going to become our medical director. And Gene didn't ask these things. He told you. There was no option. You were
Yes,
voluntold.
exactly. Hey,
And
honey,
so,
guess what I'm doing?
yeah. So, did he flip through a stack of resumes? No. Did he get a search firm? No. He certainly didn't consult Chat GPT because it didn't exist at that time. He told me I was going to do that job because he trusted me. And he trusted me because we were best friends. His youngest and my youngest were best friends. We had been on the sidelines of countless football games. We coached T-ball, a game my father invented in Anderson, Indiana. That's why he called me. And my answer, interestingly enough, so when people say, how do I build my resume? My answer is don't build resumes, build relationships. And I'm going to guess that if you think back to the mentors in your life, it was the relationship, not the resume, that mattered.
It's exactly it. It's going to be much more formative to that. So there seems to be a time period there between as you are out in practice and you're practicing emergency medicine, which is a burgeoning field at the time, and then you get to that point in August of 2001. So take me through that time period. What were you doing?
When you first start, first of all, there'd never been a medical director for the NFL Players Association before. The first meeting we go to was at NFL headquarters. It's Gene and I and the president of our union. And we walk in and there's 32 team physicians. The commissioner at that time was Paul Tagliabue, 3 owners, and they're all looking at us. And I'll never forget, we walk in and Gene looks around the room and says, "We may be outnumbered, but we'll never be outmanned." When you got a boss like that, you kind of, you feel like, shortly after, we had a very complex issue. And again, nobody's ever done this job before. So I took the unusual step of making an appointment at Gene's office downtown, because we live in Virginia. The office is in downtown DC. I was smart enough to know you don't walk in and say, "What do you want me to do?" I said, here's the issue. There's 3 ways we can go. 1, 2, and 3. I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he looked at me and he said, "Just go be Thom Mayer. That's why you are Thom Mayer. That's why I hired Thom Mayer." And I walked out and I called Maureen and she said, "What did Gene say?" And I said, "I don't have a clue. I have no idea."
He just empowered me to do something.
Exactly, but it was that the trust that matters. It was like, that's why I hired you, because I trust you to be able to do it. But of course, Gene had that, almost truculent way of saying something like that. And I think that's what we do in healthcare. We were talking about, reaching, and the tech's going to put it in your hand. You trust that they'll do the right thing. You don't have to ask all the time. That they know from experience because they've learned from experience. And I would say that they probably a little bit have made failure their fuel by, you give them the wrong size catheter and in your nice and gentle way and tell them, "No, we need the different one." But they learned from that.
That's right. Well, it had to have been a dream come true for you just to walk into that building and that association and then have all the eyes turn onto you. I mean, as a football player, that's kind of a dream organization to have, and now all of a sudden, in a sense, you're responsible and you're leading them, and you've got all these different responsibilities with regards to it. Probably makes Mike Linebacker seem easy.
Yeah, and all those, the Mike Linebacker, the theology, biology, chemistry, it all came together. I can give you an example. When I started, if you had a concussion, by NFL policy, you could go back into the same game.
Yeah.
Number 1. Number 2, they had no guidelines on both either diagnosing or treating concussions. The original so-called NFL guidelines I wrote. Sean Sanseveri, my legal partner with the NFLPA, and I wrote the original guidelines. And frankly, they weren't well accepted to begin with. Right. We don't need guidelines, our doctors are the best doctors, they do a great job and all that. And my answer was, show me the data that shows me that they're the best doctors. Show me the data that says it's okay to put a player back into the same game. You say that these days and you think, what? That can't be.
Of course.
But in 2001, that was the case. So, it took a certain modicum of courage to be able to say, I'm going to do the best thing for the players, period. Full stop, end of story. And if you think about it, that's what you do, and the colleagues you trust the most in whatever hospital or healthcare system you work in are the people who say, we're going to do the best thing for the patient. It may be inconvenient for us, but we're going to do the best thing for the patient.
Well, Thom, something strikes me about your particular position is that in some sense you have to serve a couple of different masters. Of course, your top priority is player safety. I don't think anybody would say you compromise on that at all. But the NFL does have to put out an entertaining product. And that is something that I'm certain, in private meetings and behind closed doors, they talk about. Sometimes they talk about it up front. They want to make this entertaining. They want people's eyeballs. They want people to have a good time watching it, bring family around and celebrate around this. So I mean, the safest thing would be don't anybody ever play ever. But also, these athletes, this is their raison d'etre. This is their meaning in life. And for me, I want to facilitate patients doing the things that they find most meaningful, even if it's dangerous. You want it to be as safe as possible, according to that. So I wonder, how do you reconcile those two different ends between wanting to make sure that this is a very entertaining product, but also safety is paramount?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. Typically astute question. So number one, I don't set policy on health and safety for the NFLPA. I advise the executive director, the president, the elected football player who becomes a president, the executive committee, and the board of player reps, one player rep for each team. We call them clubs. So I advise them and tell them this is the parameters, these are the consequences of that. And they make the decision. Now, they have never made a decision that I disagreed with. Never. They always do the right thing for the players and for the players' families and what needs to be done. But the fact of the matter is, it's a violent game. Even without my calculus, I learned in physics, force equals mass times acceleration. Well, the mass is higher than it's ever been, and the acceleration, they're faster.
Yes.
The thing I learned best, other than the fact of the limits of my talent, when I was with the Bears and the Vikings, was how fast these people are. I mean, that's the difference between who makes it in the league and who doesn't. And someone would say, well, yeah, but that left tackle is 6'8" and 350. Yeah, but that's not what makes him a great left tackle. It's how fast does he get back? How fast does his foot come back? Because you got an edge rusher who some people would say is arguably the most talented athlete on the field.
Athletic.
With one purpose, and that is to get around that person, and it's going to take more than size. So force equals mass times acceleration, it becomes a force mitigation equation. How can we best protect them? The helmets, we now have helmet testing. The helmet
Yes.
I wore and it wasn't leather, by the way, just so you don't have to ask.
I didn't say that, okay?
You didn't say that. You were thinking it, but you didn't say it.
Just look, let's get out of my head, all right?
So the helmets are getting safer and safer and safer over time. Rules have changed. Our kickoff rules have changed.
Kickoff rules, yes.
Yeah, and yet, what happened when the rule changed that if you drop it into the landing zone right in front of the goal line, you're going to get a return, and if you get a return, concussion scope went back up when that happened. So they went down, but that's because there were fewer returns. And it's as the great Robert Merton, not Thomas Merton, the Catholic monk, but Robert Merton, the sociologist, said, it's the law of unintended consequences. You do something with good intent, fulsomely, and then realize, wow, I didn't realize that was going to happen, or I didn't think all the way through. So, our guys would want me to stress to you and to your audience the incredible benefits of playing football. You have physical fitness, you play on a team, the camaraderie that goes with that, you get an education that for some of them would have been hard to get or impossible to get in the first place. And no, I don't want them to have the consequences, but taking things on balance is the way our guys look at it.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated on your part. There's plenty of patients so for example, ultramarathoning, that's not healthy for you. It's not good for your body. You don't live longer when you do it. But the patients that do that, it's their raison d'etre. That's what they are living to do. I want to try and facilitate you doing the thing. I don't want to tell you not to do the things that you really want to do.
Sure.
Skydiving is not safe. I mean, sure, it's relatively safe, but
how do you mitigate the consequences of doing that? So I'll tell you my ultra marathon story. I was at a sports medicine conference and I was having a beer with a bunch of ultra marathoners, and I said, I did the Leadville 100.
Oh, good on you.
They looked at me.
Wow.
They said, Doc, you did the Leadville 100, and as you know, obviously, it's a 100-mile race. Leadville, Colorado, up in the mountains. I think base is like 9,000. And you gain and lose multiple thousands of feet during the course of the thing. So they're looking at me incredulously saying, you did the Leadville 100? I said, yeah, I was in Leadville. I went to the starting line. The gun went off. Everybody took off running. And I went to a local bar and drank 100 beers and then came back. And watched him come back across the finish line.
Not
So,
a beer more than 100, though. I just want to
yeah,
say I cut it off.
exactly. Just right at 100.
You're
Not
right at
wasn't
it.
98,
Precise,
wasn't
yeah.
102. No, nothing in excess.
I'm proud of your restraint there.
Yeah.
But so again, these players are. I remember a high school teacher of mine talking about how much of a genius Michael Jordan was, and that's really what you're seeing. And you kind of alluded it to earlier. I mean, yes, Saquon Barkley is a freak athlete, an unbelievable freak athlete, but he's also a brilliant guy. I mean, just in
Yeah.
terms of being able to navigate where the best position is going to go, and these things happen quick. I mean, this is not like
Oh,
you've got
yeah.
45 minutes to decide which route you're going to take here. I mean, he's just doing this on the fly, and so
So let me
it's
tell you my genius story because I just
okay.
saw the person I'm going to tell it about. Joe Theismann, I saw him at the Super Bowl. Great guy and a good friend and very committed to football players and transition from being a player to a former player and all that. But I was actually on the training camp with Joe, and it's when the Bill Walsh's West Coast offense was first, sort of coming out.
Yes.
And this reporter, I'll never forget it, says to Joe, to Bill Walsh, he's a genius. He's, absolute genius, the West Coast offense. And Joe very thoughtfully looks at him and says, I don't think you should call anybody in football a genius. I mean, because a genius is somebody like Norman Einstein. And I lost it, and the reporter
course.
lost it. I'm
Of
talking
course.
snot out the nose laughing because he didn't realize what he had said.
Yeah.
But he gives me permission to tell that story. He is a very smart guy. He just misspoke when he talked about Einstein.
Well, Francis Newton would also have something to say
Yeah,
about that.
exactly.
So that's well. You had talked about kind of player size and momentum, and I do think there's something incredible about seeing a player like Derrick Henry, who is just an absolute beast at 6'3" or 4", 250, and who can squat a school bus. And I mean, that impact that he's going to have for linemen and for linebackers. I mean, it's a bit of a genetics arms race in pro football now to get more size and to be able to not just get bigger, but be quicker and have all the constituent muscles and sinew and tissue and fast acting fibers. I mean, it's just incredible to see how this has evolved over the past few decades.
It is, and you couple that with the discipline, the hard work, the reason he can squat a school bus is because he went through the pain of gradually getting that strong. I'll tell you a quick story. A couple years ago, when he was still with the Titans, we try to go to a couple Thursday night games a year. I say we, or my counterpart with the NFL and I and our legal partners, to fly the flag and to show the players and folks and coaches and trainers and docs that were there and we're watching and all that. And the Titans call. This was when Mike Vrabel was there. Basically, call student body left, and here comes Derrick Henry running straight toward the sideline, and unfortunately, he was running straight towards me. And I mean, yeah, I played the game, but I mean, not to get too graphic or scatological, but I thought I was going to have to change my underwear. I mean, this was, and then all of a sudden,
It's an involuntary response. I mean,
I never saw him plant his foot. The next thing, he wasn't there. He had essentially just changed 90 degrees. Actually, it was more acute angles, more like 70 degrees because he cut back against the grain, and I never even saw it because he's that fast. So it's a great combination of force equals mass times acceleration, brain power in terms of knowing where the cutback lane would be in the first place.
Right.
That comes from studying film. That comes from watching and seeing, you know what? I don't even remember what team they were playing, but their backers the second level did over pursue. And that's exactly what he saw. And I guess he went 60 yards on that play.
yes.
I was crumpled on the sideline just from the imagined contact.
I was crumpled on at my home watching it. So, but this also strikes me as, what is the first thing that you do in a code situation? Well, you check your own pulse.
Exactly.
Because then all of a sudden the training kicks in, and then you say, I know what to do here. We're going to get airway. You're going to start down the pathway. Somebody check a pulse. And it's almost an out-of-body experience whenever you do that. because it's something else that's kicking in, and you can almost watch from the sidelines as you do these things. And having been in a fair amount of codes, it's something that's it's exciting. I mean, obviously there's gravity to the moment, but there is something about, oh boy, I get to use this training. That you can see what frontline infantry soldiers could feel like when they say, oh, or perhaps Marines going Pacific Island to Pacific Island, that were having to absolutely deal with horrors, but at the same time, this is what they had been trained to do.
Yeah, it's a combination of training and trust, that you know what to do, and it's not just A, B, C, D, it's A through Z, and then double A through triple Z to be able to walk through it and have the confidence that there's an evidence-based or evidence-influenced approach. It's probably another podcast, but that distinction alone. But the trust in yourself and trust in the team around you. One of the things I've always done, and it's funny, you'll see it on both ER. I was a script consultant for the first 5 years of the show ER. And
you
now
might be the coolest person I've ever met. I'm just going to say right now, okay? This is amazing.
Means I'm carbon dated. But the Pit, the one that Noah Wiley was actually in both shows, he actually uses the same line I always use, which is does anybody want to try anything else? So that the team feels if you've got something that we haven't thought of, plus it's a team effort, and as you may know if you've seen it, you take a moment after, if the code does not go successful, to remember the person, to think of their family and all that goes with it. But you take no offense to your dermatological audience, you take a dermatologist and put them in the cath lab or in my emergency department, they're not going to like it.
Yes.
Because it's not their thing. Now, I'm about the world's worst with rashes, so if you put me in their office, I'm gone.
No, I wouldn't help at all. I wouldn't help. Yeah, Tom, it reminds me of I had a procedure where we were doing a heart cath, and then in the middle of it, the patient said, I'm feeling some tearing sensation in my back, and it's spreading to my chest. Exactly. Now, that certainly strikes your fancy, and it did mine, and it was one of those scatological moments, as you had referred to before, where it was, oh man, this is going to happen quickly, and so for those the lay in the audience, that usually implies that kind of sensation is very distinct and almost pathognomonic of an aortic dissection, and it's a true emergency where mortality is very high. Anyhow, and so we moved quickly, we got things taken care of, everything went well. But either way, in talking to my friends and my fellow cardiology fellows about that afterwards, one of them said to me, he said, we're not practicing dermatology here. And,
that's good.
That really
like
lands
that.
on you, that things can happen. The biggest mistake is not to make mistakes. The biggest mistake is not to learn from mistakes. So
it's Mark Twain said, it ain't what you don't know, it's what you do know that ain't so that's going to get you. And I will say there is a metaphor, and that is, in your case, that patient with a dissecting aneurysm was in the safest place on the planet to have that happen, number one. Yes. And number two, when we don't use players' names, but everyone remembers the player who went down with a cardiac arrest. Well, he happened to be on the safest place on earth to have a cardiac arrest, which is an NFL field with 3 emergency physicians from University of Cincinnati within 20 yards of him.
And hopefully with AEDs all the way around within arm's length, virtually everywhere in every stadium and practice facility, I would imagine that's ubiquitous.
I talk to high school teams, college teams all the time. I mean, if somebody invites me to speak to their team, I'm going to come because our young people are the future. They're going to be taking care of you and me one of these days.
Absolutely.
And so I go, and there's 2 things I always say to them. The first thing out of my mouth, guys, great to be here. Where's the AED?
That is perfect.
Nobody will. I'll say, who's the captain here? The captain will raise his hand. Go find it. Go find the AED and bring it back. And then once they bring it back, how do you use it? Because if you think about that, those guys, they may not. Most of them aren't going to play in the National Football League, but they could save a life. I mean, that knowledge could save a life. Now, the other thing I always tell, I always, you got to have a certain level of confidence to play football.
Yes.
And I look at them and I say, you know, you're not playing for the name on the back of your jersey. You're playing for the name on the front of your jersey. You know, you're representing your school.
That's right.
And you better understand that whether it's on the football field or whether it's in the classroom or whether it's Saturday night frivolities, you're representing your school and your team. And inevitably, somebody will say, "Yeah, but what about the name on the back of my jersey?" And it's like a setup. I always say, "It's not your name; it's your parents' name. Your parents have loaned you that name, and they're just wondering, as I am, if you're going to live up to it. Are you going to live up to the name on the back of your jersey? Because it's not yours; it's your parents." And I can't tell you how many kids have emailed me or texted me and said, "You know, Doc, that really helped me a lot."
Thom, that is so beautifully said. I love awe moments where you are struck in awe, and that is just beautifully said. I might take that. So if you ever hear somebody come to you and say that, just let me provide my mea culpa right here, because that's really brilliant. And asking about the AED is another really lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
Now, look, I'm cognizant of our time. I'm cognizant of your time. There were a couple of things that I did want to cover here that I think
Sure.
would be germane to our audience, and I just want to get somebody's thoughts that are insightful and kind of doing things on a big scale here. How do you think AI is going to integrate into your practice now and with the NFL? Do you think about this at all?
Oh, sure. I think about it a lot. I mean, I always think about, I always say innovation. You have to think differently. We have to act within a week, because we don't act within a week of whatever we hear on this podcast. We're not going to act at all. And the third is to innovate. And so think, act, and innovate. But innovation doesn't occur at the speed of genius, intelligence, or creativity. It occurs at the speed of trust. And so I'm always anxious to see, okay, how can things be done differently, more positively, in an adaptile fashion, if you will. And we're going to have to adapt to AI. And I've had lots of conversations with world leaders in AI and healthcare, Harvard and Duke and other places. And there's no question it's going to have an impact. And the question becomes, what impact will it have?
Yeah.
I had the great honor of speaking at the Institute for Human and Machine Cognition in Pensacola, just this incredible secret place that is, I say secret, they are public lectures, but it's just amazing. And when you talk about the existing proposals for AI, the smart people will tell you there is not enough power on this planet to power all of those AI implementations.
That's
That's
right.
why you see, all these Google, Meta, everybody else is building plants.
Power plants, moving
Right.
close to them. Mm-hmm.
So it's going to come down to, I always say data, knowledge, and wisdom. They're not the same thing. We're choking on data. The AI experts tell me not only can it not give you wisdom, it can't give us knowledge yet. I am confident it will someday.
Right.
But having the wisdom to say, simple things about what does it mean? What does it mean, and how do we apply that? So, no question, someday in our cath labs, in our offices, in our emergency departments, there will be AI that helps us make the work easier, because the only reason people ever change is if it makes your life easier, their job easier. And sure, there could be an AI suggestion, I have this tearing sensation in the back of my chest. I mean, obviously you thought of it immediately, but what if someone didn't? Or
Right.
what if it was in an emergency department? I think emergency physicians would get that. What if it was in a family practitioner's office?
Yeah.
Maybe not quite front of mind and all that.
Right.
So I think it's going to help us. I always say, and I said in Pensacola, I'm a little less interested in the AI than I am in the I. What's the intelligence that goes into
Yes.
that large language model? Because if I take 100 lousy, poorly performing emergency physicians or cardiologists and surgeons and put that together, I'm probably not going to get AI that's going to be helpful. But if I take the folks like you in your practice that have the best results and start to aggregate that in a large language model, now we're starting to say, okay, we're at least getting to knowledge, if not all the way to wisdom.
Right, and I think that wisdom is, there's one of the my wife's a physician too, so one of the best compliments that we can think of is you are a good doctor. Now that to me means that you are doing the right thing for the right patient at the right time, and you're not doing the wrong thing for the wrong patient at the wrong time. So in other words, that starts to bleed into the wisdom side, and you're very astute to note that we've got a lot of noise. Are we going to get signal from that? Very likely. Are we going to get signal that we use and implement? Time will tell. I certainly hope so.
So switch back to a metaphor, making failure our fuel. I mean, when it comes to AI, there's going to be a whole bunch of quarterbacks taken ahead of that, 199th one. And the question is, how did they miss it? And how can we not miss that in the future? And so I think AI will help us in terms of not, fatal mistakes. Yes, it'll help there, but some of the more subtle things that come down to what makes a great doctor. Plus, I do think that AI, I would say, how can we approach doing is documenting. So the very act of whether it's in the cath lab or the emergency department, you are observed to have done it, and therefore it is translated into a medical record that is accurate, reasonable, understandable, and frankly, compensatable. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thom, this is about the fourth time I think you've really been in my prefrontal cortex here. This is amazing because I've said for some time, what I really want AI to do, what I really want is for me to say, this patient needs lisinopril 20 milligrams, and it just gets sent.
Yes.
It's just done. That's already done. I don't have to say anything more about it. I don't have to worry about sending this or checking or any. It's just gone, done, taken care of right then and there, and we can move on.
Or even a voice saying, "I'm sorry, Dr. Davis, did you say esmolol 20 milligrams?" Yes. No, lisinopril. And so I can see 1,000 different ways it could help us, but I think it's going to take a bit to get there, and we're going to have to be patient with the failures.
We are, because the documentation is not our work product. Our work product is interacting with the patient, is putting our insights onto what we think is going on. The documentation is for billing purposes, and that starts with. You had spoken about this earlier in our conversation, but something that I've heard called moral injury, where you just get more and more piled upon you, and it just becomes omnipresent, and that really contributes to physician burnout. Physicians are not going to get burned out with helping people and saving their lives and making their lives better. That's not something we will get burned out on.
So the person who applied that is Wendy Dean. Wendy is a very good friend. I was on her podcast. I'm going to introduce you by email. You should have her on. She's superb.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and our middle son was a Marine infantry officer with 2 highly kinetic tours. So that, as you probably know, that came from John Shea, wrote Achilles in Vietnam. And it comes from typically infantry, but it could be any branch, who are asked to do something that is morally against their beliefs and values. And I give Wendy and Simon Talbot, her writing partner, full credit for applying that to healthcare. At first, I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, this is not a battlefield. And then the more I thought about it, yeah, it kind of is like a battlefield. But Wendy's great. I'll
awesome.
Email you.
Well, thank you. Now, just because I've got somebody that's so inside on the business, I really wanted to talk to you about a hot buzzword that I think everybody in the lay and the medical field here would understand, which is CTE. And we had talked a little bit about that, but I think CTE, perhaps it's not as well known. I think it started from military circles. Is that right? And then we kind of evolved to figure it out from contact sports?
Like most great insight, it comes from several different places. Military was one, particularly infantrymen, Marine breachers who use explosives to blow doors down all the time. But also from boxing. It was the original description was dementia pugilistica. Yes. And the journey has been fascinating. My senior thesis was on the structure of scientific revolutions, a book written by Thomas Kuhn. The paradigm shift concept is what he came up with. And it's fascinating to trace that and see how when it was originally presented, there were certain people, football people, who denied it. These guys are liars. They're thieves. They're making stuff up. Bennett Amalu, famous pathologist, was requested by the NFL to retract a paper in the journal Neurosurgery. I mean, to retract a paper is incredible.
Especially a legitimate paper that was well founded.
I mean, was it inconvenient? Sure, it was inconvenient, but now we're to the place where there are NIH clear guidelines on how you diagnose this. The issue, Don, as you know, is it's strictly a post-mortem diagnosis. So the only way you get diagnosed by that is you're dead, and your brain goes to a pathologist who looks it up and sees it. So I think the unintended consequence is, players age, and they know they played football. Their wives and families know they played football, and they develop signs of dementia, forgetfulness. Can't find my keys, can't remember stuff. They might use a different word than stuff, but we won't go there.
Indeed. Yeah. I'm familiar with that word. Mm-hmm.
Scatological reasons and all that. Well, if you look carefully, you find out that, there are incidents of hypertension, there are incidents of sleep apnea, there are incidents of chronic pain, and go on and on. All those are higher, and all of those are associated with dementia, but vascular dementia as opposed to the anatomic lesion of CTE. Yeah. So, so far there's no ante-mortem diagnosis for CTE. Lots of folks working on it. Is there a way to have tau? There's a group that we're funding at Harvard is looking at tau, essentially vaccinating for tau, so that tau antibodies could attach to tau and take it out of the system instead of depositing it. Amyloid, for Alzheimer's, that would be great too. But
Indeed.
I would just say, we're so lucky to live in the medical era we live in.
Yes, absolutely.
You can replace an aortic valve through a catheter, a mitral valve through a catheter. Are you kidding me? There's
patients can walk out of the door in 48 hours. I mean,
in many cities, there's roaming medic units with ECMO on board to take patients in cardiac arrest and put them on ECMO before they even get to the emergency department. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Look,
so someday we'll have an antemortem test and an antemortem treatment, I'm quite convinced, for CTE.
Yeah, and it begs a lot of interesting physiologic questions. Is tau the bad actor, or is that just a side effect of this?
No, 100%.
We don't know that. Is this microfracture of capillaries and therefore a release of inflammatory materials that destroys that portion of the brain, creating lesions? I don't know. I'm just throwing out different things that potentially that it could be that seem plausible. But I mean, there's certain things that never would have seemed plausible. Like, you can't get cancer from infectious disease. That's not how it works, right? You don't get gastric ulcers from bacteria. That's just not how it happens, Tom. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so
of course that encourages our infectious disease brethren to say that all diseases are infectious.
Indeed. And they would say that, by the way. I think they're looking for the same thing with CTE right now. They're going to look for the culprit around.
Well, think about, when you and I went through medical school, appendicitis had one treatment only, surgical, and the sooner the better. Are there going to be some normal appendices taken out? Sure, but that's the price of the disease. If you said let's do a double-blind, couldn't do double-blind, but a study, randomized study on antibiotics versus surgery, you would have been laughed out of medical school, of residency. And now, so-called NODA, non-operative treatment of appendicitis, is routine. And that's not the only choice. It drives toward a patient-informed decision. Which would you prefer? These are the data. We'll operate if you want to operate. We'll treat you with antibiotics if you want antibiotics. Wow.
Yeah. We patient customers get the option now, and I think there's some verisimilitude with prostate cancer now too.
Yes,
you have
100%.
Different options that
surgery. You want radiation. You want pellets. You want you choose.
Very successful too. Yeah, yes. My wife is a breast radiologist, and so
wow.
we talk a lot about breast cancer in our house. And so, let's say 30 years ago, maybe a little bit more, breast cancer was considered a surgical disease, and that's it. That is it.
100%.
You weren't taking enough breast if they still died from breast cancer. And we've evolved our thinking to say, no, we've got some tools available. Let's utilize those.
Yeah, separate podcast. You're probably going to have a guest on to talk about it, but the whole HRT issue, hormone
Yes.
replacement therapy issue in menopausal or postmenopausal women, completely blowing apart what was thought to be. I always hate it when I hear the science is settled. It's like, the science is never settled.
That's not how science works,
It
by the
doesn't work
way.
that way.
Okay, that is. Well, I'm glad you got the theological and the chemical background
Yeah,
and
exactly.
biological, so you could kind of say that for sure. Thom, what do you do for fun?
My wife is the most wonderful person on the planet. My son,
Second most wonderful. I've got a wife too here. Okay,
yeah,
I just wanted.
well, someone said once, she's your better half, and I said, no, she's my better 7/8. Let's just be clear about that. We have a saying in the NFL that applies to me, and I suspect to you, which is, you look at the guy and you look at the wife, and you go, you outkicked your coverage.
Oof.
You seriously outkicked your coverage.
I say it all. This is the fifth time now you've been in my head, Thom. The fifth time, because I say it all the time.
Yeah, so we have 3 boys, we have 6 grandchildren. We live in Wyoming. We love the outdoors. We love every bit about it. A bright day, sunny day, rainy day, cloudy day. In Wyoming, we say there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just the wrong gear. And our kids and grandkids have done that as well. We have our family motto is always do the more aggressive thing. So that's what I do for fun is that. And you might ask me after me saying, what's my deep joy? My deep joy is helping other people find and fully embrace and explore their deep joy.
That's right.
So I'm honored that you would ask me to be on the podcast and share some contrarian, crazy ideas that your guests are probably thinking, who cleared this guy to be on this podcast?
Well, I think it speaks a lot to your character that you can be so compelling with these ideas, and that one of the best things anybody can make you think of is, why do I think that thing? Because if I can change your mind, or if you can change mine, that's a really powerful thing. We don't, it's the, when you vote with your money, you vote a lot more truer to what you really believe about things, and to really change your beliefs is really impressive. Now, I've got some rapid fire questions. I'm just going to go with you here just to end up
I love it.
An absolutely amazing podcast interview here. Okay, so now, who is the smartest person in history?
This. Sorry, there's a joke I can't tell, and I apologize both to
we'll
you
wait
and
till
your
we get
audience.
offline, okay?
I can't tell that joke.
I've got a couple too that we'll share.
I would say the smartest person in history is the person who looked at E equals MC squared and said, it can't be that simple. It can't. I mean, it took us centuries, millennia to come to that. And it turns out it's not that simple, because if you go to the Einstein's paper, 1905 paper, Special Theory of Relativity, E equals MC squared does not appear anywhere in that 23-page paper. What does appear is E equals MC squared divided by 1 minus the square root of V squared minus C squared. Well, that's a little more complicated. And Einstein himself said, simplify, but not too much.
That's right. That's right. And so you can see from that as the velocity approaches the speed of light, based off that equation, that's how you get, it takes infinite energy to get there. And
exactly.
I have read, it's the Miraculous Year, his 4 papers that came out in 1905. Yeah, I mean, just some of the most seminal achievements ever, and he came out with them all in the same year, and you're just awestruck at this. Incredible. I mean, don't get me wrong, general relativity is absolutely amazing, but just to do all 4 of those papers in 1905 is incredible. So
I'll send you the English translation of that paper. It's kind of a cool thing to have.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I remember deriving that in our physics class, and it was groundbreaking to me. So, by the way, fantastic answer. I'm just going to give that to you. Okay.
You.
Now, if we can live to be 1,000 years old, should we do it?
The answer is it depends. And you learn in both theology and linebacking that the answer to any intelligent question is it depends. So I spend a lot of time with my players and my other patients talking about the distinction between lifespan, how long we live, can you live to be 1,000 years, health span, how relatively healthy you stay during the course of the time that you live. And there's a big it depends in there. But the thing that's missing, and actually we're working on both a paper and a book, joy span. The joy you take from life while you are living your allotted years during the course of the health span that you have. And there's eudaimonic joy, as Aristotle called it, the beauty of a flower, the beauty of seeing a child, an infant, a puppy, whatever it might be. But there's also generative joy, the ability for you to say, do, create things, actions, behaviors, emotions in and of themselves that create joy in others. So yeah, boy, you give me joy span and I'll take 1,000 years, but not without it.
I have been using lifespan and health span quite a bit, and I didn't put the words to joy span, so I am going to steal that idea from you
Anytime.
too. This is super high yield for me in my practice, so my patients will thank you for that. No, that is perfectly stated. That's exactly what we want to optimize. And
Sure.
it's also part of what I talk about patients is that look, now the present, this here, our attention is the only thing that we have. It's the only
100%.
thing we have.
And think about how many times your patients, particularly cardiac patients, can focus on what they don't have, what they can't do.
Of course.
And I say, I got it, I understand that, but let's focus on what you can do, because that's what's going to take you where you want to go, not focusing on what you can't do.
You have no control over if you have cancer right now. You have zero control over that. You have zero control over your blood pressure, really, but you can control if you smoke. You can control if you're going to get up and exercise. You can control if you're going to get up and play with your kids. Those are things that you can control.
Yeah, to go to that point, well, I learned a lot of this from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And for your audience, this guy was a prisoner in a prisoner of war camp, a concentration camp of World War II. Parents and family died. He survived. And yet this guy says, I realized in the midst of being in a concentration camp that I could never control what happened to me, but I could always control how I felt about it. And so he calls it, as you know, the last of the human freedoms, the ability to choose one's own way. And I think that's just a magical, I do a lot of coaching of executives of organizations, healthcare systems, and CEOs of large companies. And when I send them a document, that quote of Frankel's is the first thing up front, because if you don't understand and know that, then me coaching you is not going to help anything.
That's right. It's an absolute superpower.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so do you like it too cold or too hot at night?
I like it too cold. My patients say to me all the time, sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep. As you know, the single biggest determinant of all cause mortality in every decade of life is VO2 max. And so we can influence that. And probably the second most important thing is sleep, is getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Now, you and I, we took it as a badge of honor when we were medical students, interns, residents, fellows. I get by on 2 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep. It's like, right. Well, when did you become suicidal? When did you think that was a good idea? But, my players always say to me, particularly the former players, tell me about sleep, doc. And my answer is C&C. It's got to be cool and it's got to be calm. And what I mean by that is calm yourself by don't bring electrons into the bedroom. Frankly, don't let electrons come into the last couple hours of your day, period.
Yes.
But at any rate, it's can be C&C, cool and calm.
Yeah. Eat, drink, sleep, pee, and poop. A lot of things can be helped with those basic things. Yeah. Many clinical conditions can be helped a lot with that. So,
sure.
Just perfect answer right there. If you could go back in time to yourself as you started medical school, what's one thing you would tell yourself?
Be kind, be kinder, be even more kind, be more thoughtful. You know, think not of yourself, but of others even more than you did.
It's hard for me to think that you would have to tell yourself to be kinder. What is one current medical treatment or therapy that we perform now that we're going to shudder that we did 15 years from now?
Oh, concussion evaluations. I mean, this is like medieval that I get the SCAT 5, I get the questions, who scored last, who did we play last
Yes.
week and all that. Got it, understood. I get the neurologic exam that we do, and we demand not just that the team physician do it, but our unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant be there. But how we have failed to get a Bones McCoy tricorder, to use the Star Trek analogy, to be able to
Yes.
say, you have a brain injury or you don't. We're getting there with some blood tests that can then tell us, but we're not there yet. I think we'll look back and go, oh, what were we thinking?
Yeah, we put a lot of players at risk and other people at risk, to be honest, when we shouldn't have. So I think that's a
Sure.
great answer. Tell me about, what is the best song of all time?
Um, Jimmy Buffett, Havana Daydreaming.
Perfect. We're down here on the Emerald Coast. We appreciate that. And then finally, tell me about what books you're reading right now. What books should we be reading too?
Well, the books I'm rereading, because I've learned to read about half as much as I used to, but to reread the good ones. You can't make this up. I'm rereading Man's Search for Meaning. I'm rereading a lot of theological texts that I Reinhold Niebuhr, who, as you probably know, he's the one who did the Serenity Prayer, not AA.
Oh, yes.
And the
Yes.
wisdom behind that.
Yes.
To me, great history, great biography, the lives of great men, great women are just phenomenal. I'm rereading Katharine Graham's biography, one of the most courageous women of all time, to do what she did in the face of what she did and to stand up to it. And I'm reading my friend Walter Isaacson's got a very slim volume called The Greatest Sentence Ever Written, which is not about the Declaration of Independence, but one line in the Declaration of Independence.
Well, it sounds like I've got my reading list set up for me over the next 12 months proactively here. Look, there are a ton of things that we didn't get a chance to get to here today. I would love it if you would join us again, because
Of
this
course,
has been
be glad to do.
fascinating for me. This is it's just incredible to see. Well, honestly, to see people that are hitting at such a high level and doing so many great things for our society, because you're doing it at a very big level. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your Hall of Fame nomination, and
That'll never
perhaps
happen. That's for sure. But
some other really incredible things here.
Well, to the question, come back when this thing rings, and I don't know who it is because they're not in my contacts. I always answer the same way. This is Dr. Mayer. The answer is yes. Now let's figure out what the question is.
Let's find out what the question is. Yes.
Don, the answer is always yes for you and for the Emerald Coast. So you asked me, and I'll definitely do it. Look forward to it.
Thom, a really incredible conversation. I cannot wait for my family and my friends to hear all of this, much less our podcast listenership and our membership here. Thank you again for helping our professional players do what they do safer. Thank you for all your leadership, your authorship, and being damn funny at the same time. Okay, this is really great. I hate that I have to give Mark Noon credit here for introducing us together, but seriously, I cannot believe that we had a connection like this. So
Yeah, Mark is
thank
a
you so
great
much for
guy.
being here. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
no
really
worries.
is.
And we'll see you next time. And tell your audience, I guess I'm telling them right now, if I can help reach out, I'll make sure that you've got my email, my text. You feel free to share that with anybody who's listening to you, and if I can help them, I will.
Thom, thank you so much. We appreciate you on being here on Medical Mastery Podcast, and thank you for helping us make medicine better together.
Absolutely. It's been an honor. It's been fun.